probably live now. I'm just looking up something here. Oh,
Yeah, live.
oh, okay, good. So we're live. Good morning. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well on this nice Sunday morning. It's a nice blue sky here in Los Angeles. I can
It is
see it out my window. It's gorgeous.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah, it's
Ho-
really nice.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to you. I am in Hollywood, and I was just out there at the farmers market in Hollywood. So beautiful out there. So beautiful.
Oh,
Gorgeous.
excuse me. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. So thank you everyone for tuning in on this beautiful day. You're watching our Sunday morning show, Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please share us with your friends, your family, your next door neighbor, the grocery store worker who packs up your bags, and just anyone you can think of who might find what we do informative and helpful. I'm Margot Paez. I'm a scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist, and this is my co-host, the amazing grassroots organizer, Carlos Marroquin. So we don't have a guest today, but we have a lot to discuss. There's a lot going on in the news. There's a lot going on overseas. So Carlos, how are you doing today? And when we get started?
Yes. So look, it's been a very interesting past few weeks for me personally because I did get sick. I was really sick for a minute, and I'm still recovering. But one thing that I always do is in life in general. In life in general, we're gonna be facing storms, and one thing that we know that we cannot do is calm the storms. The storms are gonna be there, but we could calm ourselves. So that has always been my thing. Is I'm not gonna be able to change the storm. I cannot calm it, but I can calm myself down. I think that's very important to think about because we are facing a lot of stuff out there. There's all kinds of issues, problems, everything. We need to calm ourselves and we need to think. And as long as we could control ourselves, the outcome may be more favorable to all of us or to each one of us. But
Yeah.
thank you for being here, Margaret. You also are very and we all trying to do something, and it's good to see you here this Sunday.
No, thank you, Carlos. Yeah, I mean, I try to meditate. I took up some meditation in the past month, and I do these like deep muscle relaxation techniques and these energy techniques that sound very weird and new agey, but they do work. And I'm more relaxed. And I practice clearing my mind, which is helpful too. So it kind of gives you some perspective on things and focus on the now, which is really important to try to deal with all the stuff that's going on in the world. And
Self-care is critical, because and I found that out myself that usually are so deeply involved into all kinds of stuff that we neglect ourselves.
mm-hmm,
We start falling apart.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We lose focus. We begin to experience relationship problems
Right.
levels.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to take time for ourselves. You got to take time for yourself. I've been going a lot to the mountains, to the ocean, just breathing. Those are healthy things that we as progressives, as activists, as people that care about others, we need to do that. You cannot take care of someone else if you're not being taken care of yourself.
Yeah, that's a really important message, especially for activists, because I think activists are very selfless overall. They don't really they put others before themselves because they're already willing to go out and fight for other people and use their voice, their body to do that, and they don't always know when to take time to relax, take time for themselves. And I see that a lot within the activist circles of just reminding each other, hey, you know, if you're taking too much on, just say something. You know, don't keep taking all the work, because then you really burn out, and that doesn't help the movement overall if you're burnt out and too tired to keep going, because it's a long fight.
And we become ineffective because, you know, all of a sudden we're very snappy. We are very uh, short-sighted sometimes, short-tempered.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking too much on, and the world is on our shoulders, and we're carrying all this responsibility, and we feel that we got to just keep giving, and then we are emptying ourselves to the point of
Mm-hmm.
effect, to the point of becoming ill, etc. And I'm speaking by experience. I'm not just saying this to sound pretty. I'm letting you know that I failed miserably in so many of these things, and I realized that I have to do better.
Yeah, like when I tell you, don't just eat a bunch of cookies that you picked up from the food bank as your dinner. That's what we're talking about. Because Carlos does that. He's not the best at taking care of himself, but he does such good work. So everybody just take care of Carlos for him, because we need him. We do. But so Carlos, I mean, so we had some fun. What was that last week? We were at the Columbia demonstration. I already forgot what day that was, but that was a lot of fun. We were there with some organizers. They were standing in solidarity with the people of Colombia who were demonstrating against the government there. And we interviewed some people. That what were your thoughts on that event?
Well, it was great. That was actually last Sunday. Uh, City Hall, the city of Los Angeles. We worked it out where our amazing organizer Aura Vasquez, uh, you know, contacted the city officials, and they allow us to light up City Hall with the colors of the Colombian flag in solidarity with the people in Colombia. The crisis out there has changed, but the people are still in the streets. The still people are not happy with a lot of stuff that has happened in Colombia. But this is nothing new. It's just like the people have suffered so much that they've taken it to the streets because they had enough. They had enough of the oppression, of the level of poverty that people are living in, and how the government keeps taking more from the people, while the billionaire class, the millionaires, the multimillionaire millionaires keep gaining more and more, and they pay less and less. Typical
Mm-hmm.
of what's happening here in the United States and many other countries.
Mm-hmm. That's
Um,
that neoliberalism that
yeah,
we hear a lot about. It's exactly what is causing this to happen all around the world.
yeah, you have
Neoliberalist policies.
that's not working for the working class, and we need to understand that the systems that we have in place are not working for all of us. The government that we have in place is not working for all of us. You know, the government passed laws, policies that keep people in poverty, and we're gonna be talking about a lot of stuff, this stuff today, because the stuff that is affecting the working class, the stuff that is affecting families, the stuff that is affecting communities, the stuff that is affecting, you know, our elderly, are these bad policies that are coming out, and sometimes even by the Democratic Party, that uh, you know, that caters to the millionaire and the billionaire class, and never mind the Republican Party, they completely sold out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good that you mentioned, you know, the Democratic Party being complicit, because I've been going back and been listening to an audiobook version of a book about, you know, the financial crisis and the central banking system, and just the whole thing that happened in 2008 really wasn't just something that came about in 2008. It started before that. Like, even under a Democratic president, Bill Clinton, we saw the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed banks to be able to take on two aspects of the banking system that used to be separate, and that added this extra risk into the economy, and then with the derivatives and all that. So, I mean, a lot of problems have come about because of Democratic leadership, not just Republican leadership. So it's always good to point that out.
And
But
Mark,
on the go ahead.
it's important to know this because we understand that gray line that they like to play on. That they make it look like they're doing something for you. They have all the talking points, but when they start like passing the policies, are contrary to what they are saying, and they are masters at this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you open up the curtain, there's nothing behind it, and all the promises that they give. This is what drives people looking to other ways, looking to people like Trump. That's what got Trump elected. Is failed policies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You left people behind from the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And so people were fed up with that. And you have a clown that pops out of nowhere, a show host, a reality show host that begins to stir up uh, the feelings of people, and people bought into that. And they're still
Mm-hmm.
buying into that today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have nothing solid to hold on to. They don't have policies that are really helping them. So people believe almost anything that someone says out there. And
Yeah.
again, that's what we are experiencing. That's what brought about Trump. But definitely, definitely, Margaret, we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, yeah. Plus the lack of critical thinking skills that are no longer taught in our public education system. So you have a lot of people who don't know how to determine fact from fiction. They're very willing to accept what they're told by an authoritative voice, and that has caused us a lot of problems with climate change, with the pandemic, and with the politics in this country. And of course, the cable news doesn't help, right? Because they love to promote things that feed on people's emotions in the same way that the YouTube algorithms do. So it's just this feedback loop that I think is sending people down these horrible rabbit holes in which they can't come out of, which is
the mainstream media we saw, and they said that themselves, that Donald Trump was giving them the ratings.
They still talk about Donald Trump. Like, they cannot get over this guy. They bring Michael Cohen on. Like, I see him on MSNBC. I'm like, aren't you in jail? He's on house arrest because I guess, he doesn't deserve, he doesn't have to be in jail because he's a rich lawyer.
Right. And now we have another lunatic going around, Congresswoman Green.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's like really is on the verge of assaulting Representative Ocasio-Cortez. It seems like she's hell bent on getting an assault charge against her at some point.
This is the thing: she craves for attention. Green craves for attention, and the only way that she gets attention is by saying crazy things that will incite the base, the Donald Trump base, which are all, fanatics, in the sense that they believe anything that he says. And they believe that by waving the flag that they are more patriots, and they're not. Or that by, lifting out their guns, proves that they are more patriotic than anybody else. It's like they're completely out of their mind, but this is their base. And we have a Congresswoman Green that likes to say these things, and she knows by saying these things, it really gets their base going. Not only that, but it keeps her on the news. So one of the things that she was trying to do was trying to get Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to respond to her. She was challenging her for a debate. Here's a woman that is not, based in reality, that wants to debate one of the most powerful congresswomen and voices in today's politics, to debate her on what? She has nothing to debate with this woman. It's just like, me trying to debate with a professor, that is on scientific stuff. I know nothing about science. There is no debate there. So that's what was happening with her.
Yeah, but she's a cartoon character, that's for sure. But I'm a little bit worried because you remember, again, going back to the financial crisis era, 2009, 2010 was the rise of the Tea Party, which started really as an AstroTurf organization funded by these Republican organizations. But then it kind of took on a mind of its own, and they started electing themselves to Congress. And that's how we got crazy people like Ted Cruz, who's still there. He's still there, and he still has his crazy ideas, which are dangerous. So I do worry a little bit that even though Marjorie Taylor Greene is definitely a cartoon character, which could not be taken seriously, that there could be more Marjorie Taylor Greenes coming into Congress from certain parts of the country. And their base is very radical and has extreme potential for violence, which they've already demonstrated. So I do worry about the future of this country in terms of, because the fact that these people are also very alienated from society, they've seen their neighborhoods lose jobs, the economy dwindle. A lot of these Trump supporters come from some of the poorest parts of the country, and they don't really have a lot to lose. So I do worry about what that means, especially for people of color who could be caught in the the crosshairs, both metaphorically and in reality. So I do worry about that. I prefer to ignore Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I do kind of try to take a step back and think, like, what does this mean overall? Where's the trend going? And I think this goes back to, what can the Democratic Party do? Can the Democratic Party actually be a party of people that they claim to be? And I don't think they can. I don't really see it happening. I see like these tiny little steps to appease the progressive side, and I think this is a good segue into Gaza, especially into what has happened with Gaza recently. But these are all like very tiny gestures to try to quiet the progressives within the political party itself. But it's not enough to reach out and bring in the people who have been alienated by politics, who are on these extremes, who have suffered a lot and who feel disenfranchised.
You're correct, Margaret, because when we look at the Palestinian crisis, what has happened in Gaza,
And been happening.
the decimating of all those buildings that killed over 60 kids, women, over 200 people were killed. That total militarization of the whole area out there, where there is no restraints, and we have a president here in the United States that is very passive, very, still thinking the old way, and just offers no solutions at the moment when in the middle of the crisis, rather than stepping in and asserting a strong voice, against violence. He pretty much tiptoes around the tulips that allows Netanyahu to continue his bombings, uh, and killings, because he pretty much feels that he has got the full support of the U.S. government. And this is the dangerous part about Israel and their behavior at times, is that they pretty much do what they want to, get in trouble, and then they expect the United States to bail them out and just to step in. They create chaos in the Middle East without, being diplomatic about things. They use a lot of force. And mind you, Netanyahu is a Donald Trump. He's one of those right-wing mentality people. He's a far right guy. He has no interest in negotiations. He has got no interest in finding solutions. You know, he was deeply in trouble in his own political uh, career right at this moment. And many believe that he used the bombings of Gaza to save himself. That's the kind of people that are ruling. And the United States pretty much went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Dangerous.
Yeah, and there's like officially close to like 150 people were killed during the airstrikes, and 97, I calculated that was like 97% of them were Palestinians, so 3% were Israelis. And the Israeli government comes on, they send their spokespeople like Mark Regev onto the cable networks here in the United States to say, well, you know, there's Hamas and we have to go bomb those tunnels, and they keep sending it, you know, they keep shooting their rockets into Israel. We have to protect our people. When like, okay, but the disproportionate deaths are 97% Palestinian, 3% Israeli. So who are you really protecting yourself from? Like, are they really the big bad guys that you claim to be? And it's getting harder. Thankfully, it's getting harder for the Israeli government to promote this propaganda in the United States in the way that they could before, because thankfully, thanks to social media, and even though I'm not the biggest fan of Twitter, without social media, we would not have these images coming out. And these images started coming out, you know, like in 2010, around that period when these social media outlets started picking up. And that has been a blessing because they can't hide from the videos. They're out there. They're awful. It's just the same thing with Black Lives Matter. You can't hide. The police can't hide from this anymore. So for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party to act like, oh, well, we 100% support Israel's right to defend itself. It's like, who are you kidding, right?
Right.
And I think Joe Biden, he got a little bit of a wake up call this past couple of weeks, because his stance was like, well, they have a right to do what they want. We support them. And people said no, including members of Congress, you know, the Squad, which gets criticized for, I guess, not doing anything from certain people's perspectives. But here, you know, without the Squad, without Rashida Tlaib going up there and saying, hey, you can't do this. Like, you're killing people. You're killing my family members. You know, stop doing that. If we didn't have these members of Congress, it would have been much harder to put pressure. The external pressure is there. The images are there. You can't hide them. But it does help to have people in the House speaking up as well and representing us as well. And that, I think, made a big difference, because Biden had to come out eventually and say, okay, you need to stop. We need a ceasefire. And now there is a ceasefire, thankfully. Of course, it doesn't end the fact that we have an entire people who are basically living in an open air prison. They just lost more residential buildings. So many children were murdered on Eid, you know, during like supposed to be one of the happiest, most important, fun holidays in Islam, and they could not even celebrate it. I mean, it's terrorism, and it's United States supported terrorism, and the Democratic Party supports it. So that is just not. It's just a sign to me that, you know, the Democratic Party is just moving too slow. It doesn't seem to realize where its base is.
Right. And some of the things that are coming out right now is the billions of dollars that the United States to Israel for weapons. There is right now, they have a commitment of $38 billion for the next few years to buy more weapons. And again, when they take actions like they took this past week, people begins to question, why are we giving so much money to them and violate human rights of people that are not doing anything to them. So we gotta be paying attention to this. People are paying attention to this. We have voices in Congress that are raising, you know, these questions, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. Look, at the end of the day, is the people of Israel deserve peace, but so that Palestinians, they deserve peace as well. You know, lives matter, for the people in Israel, in Palestine, in Lebanon, wherever. Humans' lives need to be respected. Stop all this killing, all these wars. What's happening in Colombia should not be happening. And so the same thing is happening in Honduras, Guatemala, Salvador. And
Yeah, these are
violations.
Yeah, these are all just a result of neoliberal policies and also U.S. imperialist policies. And that was something that I was going to say earlier, is that Joe Biden is an imperialist. So for him to support these things, like in Gaza, what's happening with Gaza, is because he only cares about U.S. interests. He said so on the Senate floor when he was a senator, that it didn't matter, even if even if Israel didn't exist, we would still need something there to defend U.S. interests. And I'm paraphrasing that. So, we live under a form of imperialism. United States is an imperialist country. You could say like a corporate imperialist country. And the neoliberal policies that came in the 1980s, brought in, with the Chicago School, Morton Friedman, those policies have decimated the Latin America, South America, and with the coups. I mean, the whole thing is that neoliberalism, it doesn't favor democracy. It does much better under fascism or dictatorships, because it just means that you can just do whatever you want effectively. So we're just dealing with the after effects of that, and then we have to, of course, change them.
Look, we don't like what's happening at the border. We see all this migration, to other countries, violence. This is exactly what happened, these kind of policies. So you have all these people in Palestine that had to flee the bombing. Well, where do you expect them to go? And then you don't want them to be at your borders? We create these circumstances, these conditions that people have to flee. So if we don't like what's happening on our U.S. border, we better be paying attention and having better policies in Central America, because we're causing the conditions for people to flee.
Yeah, and of course, with climate change, I mean, the global south is the most affected by climate change. And we are seeing climate refugees coming across the border now, trying to flee from droughts, failed crops. All of that starts to create economic instability on top of the economic instability caused by these invasive U.S. policies in South America and Latin America, Central America, where they were installing politicians and through coups and stuff. So, I mean, it's just one thing after another for these regions, and the United States refuses to take responsibility for them, and it just shows up on the United States' doorstep, I guess you could say. But these are all a result of American imperialist policies. So it's not a surprise, and then we have to deal with it. We have to take care of these people. I mean, like progressives, people who actually believe in human rights, like some guests that we've had on who go out to the border and try to take care of the children and educate them. I mean, these kids, they should be at home, and they're not, because the United States basically screwed up their life.
And if we bring things at home, we bring things right to home, we see that these same ideals and these same policies are creating conditions here at home that are detrimental and are hurting and in many cases devastating our communities at so many different levels. But right now we have a major crisis coming out from the pandemic, and we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic, the latest on that. But coming out of the pandemic, companies are finding a hard time getting employees, getting people to join the workforce. But we got to understand the conditions that have been set leading into that. Not only the pandemic that devastated a lot of different jobs, and so many companies had to close, restaurants, etc. but the amount of rejection from big corporations towards the workers, treatment of big corporation towards the workers, low wages, no benefits, all this insecurity. There is no safety nets in place, and then you wonder why people don't want to come and work. I'm offering these jobs, but the jobs that you were offering are slave wages, where people are just literally just working to put the check in somebody else's hand, and they have nothing left over. They force
Right.
people to work and find another job to try to still pay the rest that they still owe. And maybe that's not even enough. They have to get a third job, and still
Right, exactly.
goes to the pockets of the people. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm talking about. We have a crisis, and that crisis is wages. It's not that people
Exactly.
work. It's you
Yeah,
pay.
exactly. Yeah, just for anyone who's just tuning in, you're watching Stand Up Fight Back. I'm Margot Pius, and this is Carlos Marroquin. We are today's show. We're just touching on some issues that have been irking us recently, and next week we'll most likely have another guest we can engage with. So thanks for hanging with us today. But so Carlos, back to your point about the so-called labor shortage. I was reading a little bit about that, and one of the things that I'm hearing a lot in the news is that $300 a week extended unemployment that people are getting, and that's why nobody wants to work, because it's just easier to just be at home and be lazy with your money that you're getting from the government. So then I thought about, like, okay, well, $300 a week times 4 weeks, that's $1,200 a month. If you would rather get $1,200 a month than go and take one of these jobs, I mean, what the heck are they paying, right? Because $1,200 a month is not a lot of money. It's nothing. That's still nothing. That's still poverty. So what is the alternative? The alternative must be way worse, must be less than $1,200 a month if people are not willing to go out and take that job. So instead of blaming the workers, I mean, we should be blaming the employers, right? Because the employers seem to be unwilling to pay what people deserve. And now here's an opportunity in which workers can be at least that much empowered. Of course, it's also not just that, right? It's like people are afraid to go back to work, especially in these service sectors, because they don't want to get COVID. These were the people who were the frontline workers, the heroes, right? They were the ones getting sick and dying for everybody else who was more privileged, who didn't have to take that job. And there's one more point that I want to make, because I also saw something interesting that didn't quite make sense, didn't gel with this narrative about this unemployment stuff, is that so wages did increase 0.6% in April to an average of $30 an hour. So I'm like, an average of $30 an hour, but in unemployment is basically giving you $1,200 a month. That is not even minimum. That's not even like $15 an hour. So how can that be that the average wage is $30 an hour, but the unemployment is way below that, and yet you still can't hire people? So that narrative, I think, falls apart very quickly if you start looking into it. And I think it's just an excuse for people for states to cut unemployment, which they've done in certain southern states like Georgia, and just force people into indentured servitude or some kind of sharecropping type situation where you're basically a slave to these corporations.
Slave work. Let's call it for what it is. Slaving people. And that's what they want to drag the people back into slavery. They don't want to pay the wages. And let's call it for what it is. And these corporations, you have corporations like Amazon and many other big corporations that make so much money out of the pandemic, billions and billions of dollars a day in profit. But yet they didn't want to give a single dollar of emergency, wages to the frontline workers. You know, that's the kind of disgusting policies that we have. Politicians, protecting these corporations. So yes, uh, uh, oh, there are 22 states, Republican-led states, that are cutting these benefits, the unemployment benefits. But the other reality to this is that you have a lot of Democratic leadership that have had so hard time even pushing for $15 an hour minimum wage. A lot of Democratic leadership are against it. So hear me out before you start pointing out to Republicans and to Donald Trump. Democratic Party are part responsible of low wages because you have failed to push and promote and do everything you can to raise the minimum wage. And you have had plenty of opportunities. Right now, you have an opportunity to do it. Do you think that the Republican Party are going to touch their hearts and want to compromise with you? They don't. They're not interested in compromising. They're going to do what they're going to do. So if Democrats have not learned that by now, they will never learn. They need to do what they have to do right now. You have a state of emergency in the country, and you got to be able to help the people.
Sorry, I was muted. No, I muted myself because of my dogs. They were barking, and I forgot that I didn't unmute. But yeah, I mean, it would just be easy. Just give people $15 minimum wage at minimum. You know, I mean, it's not even enough now. $15 is not even enough, but it's better than $7.50 or whatever it is. And then, you know, like these service workers, especially the ones who work for tips, I mean, they can get even less than that. So it's just a form of slavery, and I think people are realizing that they deserve better. So I'm hoping that we see more pay raises.
Right. Economists have said that minimum wage right now should be at least $24 an hour. We're debating $15 an hour and having a hard time passing that. Is for, come on now.
Yeah, that's what worries me about the Democratic Party. I don't like the Democratic Party. It's been a long time since I've liked it. I've many times have voted third party because have been so disillusioned with them, especially since the financial crisis. But at the same time, like, I see the reality. We have a Democratic Party and we have a Republican Party at the national level that are making the decisions. And so I say, okay, well, the Democratic Party has to do something or else things are going to get worse. And when I see that they can't even get their entire party behind a $15 minimum wage amendment, I feel like, okay, there's very little hope with this party because, we need serious change. We need transformational change. Everybody says that. You read it in the academic papers, you read it in the news, you hear it, it's everywhere. I hear it in different ways, in different situations, not even political. It's like transformation. That's what we need right now. And when you look to the government, they are still acting like they're living in, I don't know, the 90s where things were great. They had all this time. We have all this time to figure out climate change, We have all this time to figure out the economy, trade agreements, whatever. We don't have that time anymore. And even Biden admits that we're at a crossroads, but he doesn't seem to understand that you have to take action.
We cannot play nice anymore. We cannot afford to play nice anymore. People need help. The world is in crisis. Climate change is real. It's either real or it's not. Come on.
It's definitely real. For anybody who's not sure, right. It's real.
Well, when I hear of some of the policies that are coming out, well, we're gonna go into renewable energy and we're gonna transform this by the year 2050.
Mm-hmm.
50. Mm-hmm. Come on now. That's not leadership.
No, I saw something just like that recently on Twitter. I think it was from the UN COP. It was like, which is like the big climate meeting. And they were saying like words like every phrase that they had was in the future, like moving toward, transitioning to, aiming to, lower. Right. It was nothing in the present, and they've been saying that over and over, and And it's like, okay, well, at least, yeah, great, you're acknowledging it. But this is like the COP27, COP26, and you're still using these terms. I mean, we don't have time. Yeah, it was like transitioning away from coal, phasing out international fossil fuel finance, delivering the 100 billion climate finance commitment. Like, okay, but none of that is now. And we're like 8 years away from the so-called point where of no return in terms of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? And you're still saying this, and this is supposed to be all of the greatest minds in the world coming together under the United Nations from different countries, policymakers, and this is the best that they can do. It's really insulting. I mean, I don't know who they're trying to kid here, but I'm not buying it. And no one should buy what they're saying. I think it's just that people are still not paying attention. We don't hear anything about climate change on the news. People, CNN and MSNBC rarely mention climate change unless there's a big wildfire. They're like, all they talk about are vaccines. They talk about Donald Trump. And Joe Biden was just driving an electric truck. Great. Oh, fantastic. Joe Biden got behind the seat of an electric truck. Hooray. Not to mention the fact that yes, it's great that we are trying to transition away from gas-powered cars, but there's a whole ethical issue that comes about from using electric cars. And I admit that I advocate, like I'm trying to convince my mom to get an electric car, but I'm concerned that we have to mine a lot of precious metals in order to produce these batteries. And that means that these metals are being mined in other countries, like in Bolivia, for example. I don't know if anybody remembers, there was an attempted coup in Bolivia, actually a successful coup for a short period of time. And part of that had to do with the lithium resources of this country. So when we see, yeah, it's great that we're considering moving towards renewables. We're talking about it. The politicians are talking about, Biden is talking about electric cars. Yeah, I'm seeing car companies saying, we're phasing out gas cars. We're going electric, which, yes, is important. And I'm happy to see that. But at the same time, we need to look at the big picture, because we have the potential to create a new disaster that is on the scale of on a separate scale of environmental disaster that in which we created using oil as energy. So I don't hear this discussion. I just see that some companies have finally realized, okay, the dynamic is changing in the world, the environment, the discourse is changing. People don't like oil. Oil is no longer popular. So we have to move to the next thing. But it's all just driven by profit, right? It's just like, okay, well, we can make money with the electric cars now. I mean, we've had electric cars since like the beginning of this millennium. Electric cars, hybrid cars have existed on the market. And it's only now because sentiment is changing, right? And so now they're worried about their bottom line. But at the same time, it's like they'll just go wherever they want to get to mine, and they don't care about what the effects will be on the populations in the countries in which this mining happens, or what the effects are on the environment. And so we really have to seriously consider these things when we see Joe Biden sitting behind an electric truck on CNN. I feel like I can't really applaud him, because he's just doing it because it's going to make some corporations rich. And it's not really that he cares about climate. I don't actually think he does. I don't think that he actually that he has a full understanding of what is happening with climate change. Carlos, are you okay? I know I'm on my soapbox, but you ran away. Carlos, what happened to you? I think I lost him. Well, I'll just keep on my rant here about climate change, because that's my rant. But yeah, I'm worried about it. So I want people to know that when you hear about renewables, when you hear about electric cars, you should just keep in mind that there are environmental issues that come about with that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do those things. I'm just saying that we need to do them in a way in which is sustainable, in which it's equitable, just, in which we're not fueling imperialism through, just because we want to get away from oil because we have to get away from oil. But if we don't solve the problems that cause these injustices through oil, like all of the wars that we had over oil, the oil wars in the Middle East, the invasion of Iraq, things like that, the wars between Iraq and Kuwait, all this stuff is over oil. And we could very well see ourselves having wars over mining of these precious metals so that we can have electric cars. And is that the future we want? I don't think that's the future we want. I don't want that future. So we have to really think about where we're going and how we can do this so-called just transition. And I don't see the Democratic Party really getting involved in that. And I don't even see our world leaders doing that with the United Nations, with the meetings that they've been having. So these are my concerns when it comes to climate change and renewables. And I just completely lost Carlos. Oh my goodness gracious. So I'm here with all of you by myself now on a rant. So thank you everyone who's here. We lost Carlos momentarily. If you're just tuning in, you're watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we give analysis and commentary for the progressive movement. And I've just been ranting about climate change because I'm always upset about that. Thanks, you can always get me to talk about it. Carlos, you're back.
I know I had some little problem difficulties there, but I'm here.
Yeah, I was just trying to maintain a rant, but I'm not the most ranty person. I mean, I care about these things, obviously, but I like talking with you.
Change and all these, things that politicians say that sound good, but the reality is when you open the curtain, there's nothing behind the curtain. It's empty, an empty room. So we need real policies with real change. And we don't need to hear, well, we're going to do 35% of this, or by the year, 2050. It's like, come on, we need to get some real leadership and policies in place so that we can address the crisis and address it, in a way that is sound and effective. So pandemic is winding down.
Yeah, and I wanted to just make one more point before we transition, because I feel like I always have to defend AOC because there's so much negative information out there. And I know she's not perfect, and I have criticisms of her too. But I saw something recently on Twitter where somebody was like, oh, so I guess we've given up on the Green New Deal, right? And on climate change, we're totally screwed. And I just wanted to point out that actually AOC and Senator Ed Markey both co-sponsored and reintroduced the Green New Deal in the past week, I believe. So if you're not hearing about it, it's because it's not in the news. So do your research and don't just listen to people who are always like, oh, AOC sold us out. AOC threw us under the bus. She's just one of them. She's just a sellout. I mean, this is what we're working with right now. She's not perfect. The squad's not perfect. We're not always going to agree with them on every issue, and they're not always going to agree with us. We don't all agree with everything that Bernie Sanders does. And I think, yes, we should always put pressure on them because that is the most important thing to do. It's difficult to work in the environment that they work in, and it's easy to just sometimes want to just go with the flow. And that happens to everybody in any institution. You have to really fight that urge. So it's important to put pressure. But I really get ticked off when I see this clickbait stuff. And so I want to point out that she and Ed Markey reintroduced the Green New Deal. So anyone who is complaining about that, just do a little bit of reading and you'll see that they're still fighting for these things. You just don't necessarily hear about it. It's not in the news. Climate change is not in the news anyway. So we just have to be a little more aware of what's going on. But go ahead, Carlos.
It's really important for people to understand how the political system works and the challenges that exist if you're a representative, because you may have the brightest idea and you might perhaps run your campaign promises certain things. And that's the dangers of promising a lot of stuff, because the reality hits once you're in power, because not everybody's going to agree with the policies that you want to push. And you could have the best ideas and you could have all the talking points and actually you could outright believe that this is what you want to do, but you will have opposition. And we need to understand that the opposition is real. People are not just going to allow you to do anything you want to. You have big money behind it. You know, Medicare for all has been raised to the highest levels of conversations that we ever seen. Uh, Also, thanks to the pandemic, a lot of stuff was exposed. Yet you see the kind of opposition against it. So uh, we gotta support those people that are in power that that want to push these policies, but we cannot give up the minute that something doesn't work out. You know, we got to encourage them to keep finding other ways to keep fighting, and we got to continue to promote all the candidates so the more power, but the more numbers we have in there, the easier it becomes to put pressure. You know, mind you, Joe Biden is not doing a lot of these policies because he wants to. Is because he's being forced to because of all the pressure that is coming his way from the left. So that's the good thing. And, you know, with the squad being there, with the public outrage, with conditions on the ground, it pressures these bad politicians to move to the left or to move towards creating policies that work better for us. Got to continue to do our part. I mean, I fail people left and right. Politicians will fail you, but don't set your eyes on me. Set your eyes on, you know, the goal. You know, we're working together. You know, if we fail, we encourage one another so that the next time we don't fail. You know, sometimes people give up because they don't feel that no one is behind them. I imagine myself being in the shoes of some of these politicians with the kind of issues that the nation is facing. For example, homelessness. That's a really tough issue because it has so many different facets to it. You know, so for those people that are in power, it's easy for me, and I say it like that because I can say so many things about it and criticize politicians. I'm not in their shoes. It's a difficult situation, and they got to deal with stuff that I don't have no idea that they have to deal with. But one thing that I know is that we do have to hold them accountable, but we also have to participate as progressives, as people of ideas, as people representing the working class. We not only criticize people, but we have to also bring solutions.
Yep, of course.
Right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't put all of our faith into just electoral politics. I mean, we wouldn't have Bernie Sanders, we wouldn't have the squad if it had not been for protests. If it had not been for the Occupy movement, there would not have been a space for Bernie to walk into. Because Bernie had these ideas, right? Like all his life, I guess, since he was a young person, he's always believed in these ideas, but there was no national discussion in which he could just walk right into and be like, hey, I got these ideas too. I've been here all along. Until after Occupy, until that moment in which, I mean, the whole idea of the 99% versus the 1% came from even what some would say like the far left, but which I don't really call it that, but some people consider anarchism sort of far left. I don't think of it that way, but like it was an anarchist. It was an academic anarchist named David Graeber who came up with the idea of the 99%. We are the 99%. And what was the struggle during Occupy? It was the first time we really could talk about income inequality, the growing income inequality, the stagnation of wages in this country, the fact that Wall Street got bailed out and mainstream did not get bailed out, the fact that people who lost their homes because banks were playing with these derivatives of mortgages got nothing. They lost their homes. They never got them back. That was the struggle during that time. And if we had not had this national discourse because some people got together and said, you know what, let's just occupy a park. And this spread like wildfire across the country. In LA, we occupied City Hall. If this had not happened, we would not have had a Bernie Sanders. There would have been no space for Bernie to run for president in the future after Obama.
Yeah,
So
you're absolutely
we
Margaret.
need to realize that the power lies with us, not with the politicians. We set the narrative for them, and it has to happen through mass movements. And I'm really hoping, Carlos, that now that the pandemic seems to be getting a little bit better here, that people will start to feel safe because they're vaccinated, and we can go back to being out on the streets and occupying physical spaces again. Because I think that's what we need to do. We have a lot of issues that we need to fight for, like student debt or just debt in general. We live in a debt society. We have to fight for minimum wage. We have to keep fighting for health care, because they're not going to do it without us. And we have to keep electing people who think like us.
Right. I mean, the kind of situations that we are facing right now, it calls out for people's movements to rise up and continue to fight. So you are absolutely correct, Margaret, when you have given us the picture of how Bernie Sanders rose up to the levels that he is. He always believed in those things, but that he didn't have the platform and the people behind it until the Occupy movement created that for him. Because I remember us pivoting from the Occupy movement campaign. We Los Angeles. We transitioned. We're fighting foreclosures, but we had reached a certain limit. We did the conversation. We put the blame where it was, but now it was like, what do we do now? Here comes Bernie Sanders speaking the same language that we're speaking, and he's running for office. It makes sense for us to support him. So all those things that he was saying, it was the same things that we believed on. So he rose up in the numbers from being someone that was not known across the nation to an everyday conversation where everybody was talking about Bernie Sanders. Even Republicans like Bernie Sanders and the things that he was saying. But we the people created those conditions for Bernie Sanders.
And I would, go ahead, Carlos.
Bernie Sanders created the conditions for people like Ocasio and the squad, the other ones. He pretty much opened those spaces for him, but it was all done because of the people, the people movement. So I am excited because we have candidates that are running for office that have our thinking. But at the same time, you have the other side that we cannot ignore that are, pretty much fantasizing in all things that don't work. You have the Greens, you have the Ted Cruz mentality. So that's the opposition. So, Margaret, I wanted to touch really fast on the continuing crisis with a housing crisis and homelessness, because as the pandemic winds down a little bit, and right now what we are seeing here in Los Angeles, that a lot of the encampments are being cleaned up either by force or other means. We saw what happened in Echo Park, where a massive police force went and violently closed the encampment to beautify the park. What I'm seeing right now, Margaret, is a lot of politicians are going out there to the streets, taking pictures, cleaning up the streets, showing how the street was dirty before and how it looks now. That's beautiful. They were supposed to be doing all those things. That's what they get paid to do, to make sure that we have healthy streets, clean streets, and services. The danger to that is that by posting all those pictures and making it look like they're doing something, the real problems, the real root of the problems are not being dealt with. It's almost like, look at me, I'm cleaning your streets, I'm cleaning up the homeless encampments, but homelessness still exists. They're just pushing them to other parts of the city. That's what's happening right now without bringing real solutions. They're offering right now tiny homes. Oh, we just opened this place over here with all kinds of tiny homes. Really, is that the best we can do? put people in tiny homes.
Uh, so,
Don't
no, let's get you started. But Carlos, you went down to the MacArthur Park recently. I'm not MacArthur, to Echo Park recently, and did you see any homeless, any unhoused people coming back into the park, or?
Well, they haven't opened yet. They're going
Okay.
to in the park on May the 26th. But what I did see is that they already have put a lot of signs all over the park, you know, pretty much with the rules of the park, and everything is geared up on towards the homeless people, the house. You cannot pitch a tent. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. So all the rules in there are pretty much targeted towards those people that are unhoused. We knew that was coming. Same thing happened during the days of Occupy when they kicked out everybody out of the park. When they reopened, they had all kinds of rules, hours of operation. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. They were taking control of the park. That's okay. That's okay. If you want to do that, that's okay. But you're still not resolving the problem, the root of the problem. And same thing here. Yeah, you could take control of the park if you want to, but we still have people sleeping under the freeways. We still have people sleeping in front of small businesses. We still have people sleeping everywhere throughout the streets. They have a big crisis right now in the city of Venice at the beach, where there's a big encampment over there. Well, how do you think those people got there? It's because they've been getting kicked out of everywhere else throughout the city. So yes, we can blame. There's a lot of people blaming City Councilman Bonning for the encampment there. But let's be realistic here. The problem in the city of in Venice and the encampment out there was created by the entire city hall, by the mayor of Los Angeles. The problems are in front of your street. When you go over there and you see people on the sleeping on the side of the freeways or whatever street you live on, yes, we can blame the city councilman in that district, but the responsibility belongs to everybody at City Hall. They created those conditions by allowing all these developers and gentrification to destroy our city. That's what the problem is. I haven't said.
Yeah, but it's not like this didn't exist before in these parts. Like Venice has always had a certain unhoused population. The LA has always had an unhoused population, like in Skid Row, things like that. I mean, that's something that I've seen my entire life being in Los Angeles. I'm born and raised here. I've known Skid Row. It's like one of my earliest memories of being downtown. So it's like it's no surprise that this is happening because this is something that has been building for decades. My dad used to tell me when we would see people living on streets, he'd say, this is a result of Reagan's policies. Reagan closed down a lot of these institutions and forced people out onto the streets. And so I see this as like part of an economic policy that we've been living under since the 80s, which again we call neoliberalism, and has led to people being forced out of homes with nothing, no health care, no roof over their head, no access to jobs. And it's a traumatic experience, and it becomes a cycle of poverty, a cycle of homelessness. And for the city to respond this way and just basically give people even less opportunity to be a human being, to be seen as human, I think is really a crime against humanity that the city council is acting against people in this city.
I'm gonna give you an example. We have District 13, which is Councilman Mitch O'Farrell, where Echo Park is situated. He pushed everybody out of there. They offer room and key services and a few other services that don't work. Everybody knows that they don't work. They spend millions of dollars, and those services, only help a minute number of the unhoused for different reasons. There's many reasons to that, but they don't work. But they want to keep driving that. They want to keep spending all these billions of dollars on services that don't work. But I think that the greater problem, just as he's pushing all these people out, just as the pandemic is raging, I have documented and I've gone around his district particular, taking pictures of all these developments, luxury developments that are going out about his district. Guess what? He's responsible for that. They're creating conditions where people cannot afford the rent. They're creating conditions where people are being forced out of their neighborhoods, out of their homes that they once they were able to afford. Now the cost of housing has rose up in leaps and bounds. Who can afford to buy a house now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
to rent a one bedroom apartment.
Oh,
You know,
Carlos. Yeah, you're right. My sister was looking for a house recently. We went around the Echo Park area, downtown LA areas, Silver Lake areas, and the only places she could afford were these tenant in commons, which were originally these like tiny little houses that were built next to each other, like on one plot of land that might have just been like for one house. And they're these small little boxes, and these things cost like $300,000, and you're attached to another little box, and you have like maybe a little area, and these were only meant to be rented. And it's a little bit controversial because they're high risk for the lenders, because it's not seen as individual plots of land. So if somebody defaults or moves out and has to find somebody to come in, it's like one big mortgage for the whole thing. But that's literally the only thing that exists for new homeowners, is these tiny little boxes that are well overpriced, and people are buying them up because that's the only thing that they can afford. And why? Because they're like, well, I'm just tired of paying rent, I want to put my money into something. And so they're buying these little things that 10 years ago no one would be buying, because they were not meant to be homes. They were not meant to be like things that you own. They were little rental properties. So this is the situation in LA, and where I'm from in Monterey Park. Like this was just a middle class, working class city for a long time, and I'm starting to see like fancier cars, because the homes here are close to $1 million, and they're still probably living out here is probably a little bit more affordable than living in certain parts of being in the city proper. But like, the people who are moving in here are a completely different demographic than what used to be here when I was growing up. And it's because like there's just nowhere to buy homes. So it's a big housing crunch. And like you're saying, like building these luxury developments doesn't make the situation any better. You're still forcing people out. Like the majority of people who live here can't afford them. Only a certain small number of people can afford them. So you're forcing all of those people out, and they're in trouble, because even the little bit out that you go is still expensive. So it's not a viable situation that the city is doing here, or in the state in general is creating here. And a similar thing happened in New York. And what ended up happening is that like 70% of these skyrise developments were empty, and they were also delinquent. The developers were also delinquent on paying taxes, and organizers there were trying to get the city to use eminent domain to take over these buildings and house people in them. Of course, it didn't happen, but I mean, why have these empty buildings?
We're creating a situation that is going to get worse. It's going to blow up in their faces. But the thing is, like, look, you end up buying, if somehow you're able to do it, you end up buying a house, or you're able to rent one of these luxury apartments. Then you have to deal with the fact that you have all these people sleeping on the streets. And now you're complaining, crying, and you want the city to do something because you don't like to see people sleeping in front of your street. Well, guess what? That's the conditions they created. And we allow that to happen. And, it's not going to get any better. I know that the governor has promised $12 billion. That's what he wants to do to deal with homelessness. I think that amount is very small to what needs to happen. I think that there's ways of dealing with a housing crisis, including to be able to, if developers don't want to get involved in that kind of business of building affordable housing, that's okay. We have what is called the U.S. Army of Engineers. They could come and build 1,000,000 homes in no time. Come on, people. There's ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Really, I'm think about it. It's like, okay, let's bring the, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and build some massive housing. They build massive infrastructure, for the U.S. highways. They can do that.
Yep. We can do all these things. It just seems that our political leadership doesn't care. They'd rather take a bunch of money in from corporations than to actually do the obvious.
Right. So our time is up, Margaret.
Yeah, it's time for us to sign off. So, any last words?
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the amazing volunteers that have been working in so many organizations. As the pandemic winds down, I got to celebrate the volunteers that stepped up and became frontline responders, first responders. They literally put their lives on the line for others. So if there's anything that good has come out of this pandemic, is the fact that we know that there are good people out there that gave everything, put everything on the line for others. That's what gives me hope in knowing that, when the pandemic was raging, so was the hearts of many volunteers that were out there week after week saying, I'm here to serve, So as long as we have people like that, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're taking care of each other.
Yep, I agree. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us this Sunday morning. You've been watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm Margot Paez, co-host, and over here, that's Carlos Marroquin. He is our co-host. He's an amazing grassroots organizer, impresario of Los Angeles and Southern California. So please tune in every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, when we usually have a guest on with us and we talk about all the important issues that matter to us in this movement. And we try to encourage our viewers to get organized and participate as much as possible in the process, because this is the only way that we're going to see the changes that we need to see happen. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to get vaccinated if you haven't, and still wear your mask, because we're not quite out of the woods yet. So take care, everyone.